Welcome to Intake. If you haven't already, why don't you hit the subscribe button and then the notification button so each time we drop an episode, you will be notified. It's time to shine the light from a mental health perspective. Welcome back to this special edition of Intake, Beneath It All in the African American Community, Episode 1, Part 2.
But everything that we do is taken out of context, particularly the Black Lives Matter hashtag. It was in response to the fact that white lives always matter. Mm-hmm. We're saying our lives matter too, but even that is taken out of context to say, you're saying other people don't matter. No. And we don't know how to have this, having this conversation sometimes is so challenging. And yes, the tactics that they use during antebellum is really about you are going to be controlled. You are going to be subdued. You are going to be conditioned to doing it the way that we need you to do it. Because after all, this is a business plan and you are a product in that business plan. And you are to continue doing the work that you need to do so that we can live this life that we want to live. But the more you gain information, the more you feel centered, the more you feel the ability to really be able to advocate for yourself, then we are threatened. Then the things may change and we have to share. Then you will feel empowered. Yes, many of us get through, many of us achieve many great things. It's not enough, though. It's not enough of us given that opportunity. And it's the messaging that we get. Imagine the messaging from COVID that you won't get it, that you don't, that things protect you. All of these things has contributed to why we do not succeed past the goal that we want to succeed as a unit. Some of us make it past, but as a unit, we don't do so. So for me, yes, stress is in going to being able to be honest with your provider and not feeling like they're going to judge you, because I can say from my experience, they do. They absolutely do. A young girl who may have had 3 or 4 partners, they will deem as promiscuous, rather than understanding that this is a community level issue. Why is this the case? What is the basis for this happening? It's not just because they're promiscuous and they want to have sex and that this is just the going trend. There are reasons that contribute to why. And one factor can be they may have been abused as a young kid. No one knows what is going on. Each person has an individual story. And this is why we suffer, because no one is interested really in our individual stories.
Yeah, I agree. And it's sad that another young girl, Caucasian, can go and sit in front of a doctor and have 3 or more partners and is never questioned. Because, of course, Western society has always painted African American women as highly sexual and African American men as angry, rapists, murderers, unfortunately. I found it interesting when you were talking, Gina. I remember when I was studying for my master's in psychology, I had a professor who showed us the Hidden Colors video. And it was a class that was multiracial, multicultural. And as the video was showing, one of the young men said, well, why did it have to be so angry? And basically what they were talking about was how Western society has tried to darken us out with so many things and make us appear that we've always been slaves. And they do that by not teaching us our history in school. And the only history that we know, at least the only history I knew when I was coming up in school, was that the slave history. It didn't teach us African history. I didn't realize that there were kings and queens of African descent until I became older and started doing the history research myself. But I didn't learn that in school. So back to the class, when he said, why are they so angry? I had to respond with, what do you expect when for years you've been lied to and made to seem less than based on your skin color? You've been lied to and said that all you've ever been was a slave. You've been lied to in so many areas, and now that you have come to a place to do the research and realize that, hey, I am the basis of this human life. I've started, here I am. This all started in Africa, and we built this. Then of course you become a little bothered because you realize that Western society has painted you in a different light. And of course that painting of you has made you feel some kind of way and wonder about your own identity. Because as a mental health professional, can I just be real? I work with adolescents and adults. And a lot of times I come across brown-skinned adolescent youth who are going through anxiety, all different kind of issues. And when I get down to the baseline, it's simply because they're in this brown skin.
Yes.
And there is not one intervention, modality that can help me help this child with their anxiety, because for one, these interventions weren't created for African Americans. They were created for white society. So as an African American therapist, what I have to do now is begin to empower this child. Yes. And I do that with talking about African American history.
Right.
So
and make adaptations.
Yes. Yes. And so when I'm looking at this, and you all can see I'm real passionate. I'm passionate always. But when I look at this, it bothers me because I realize that we do need more of us in the helping field. More of us who are passionate about helping the community understand what is behind all of this, helping them understand why they're feeling the way that they're feeling, and then help them come to some type of resolve. Because a lot of times I'm like, hey, how am I supposed to help this child cope with the fact that we live in a society that just don't like you because you have brown skin? I can't tell you to just go listen to some music and rock it out. So my only resolve is to empower you. And so I've had to invest in different ways to help these young people, little cards about African history and, and play these games with them so they can, know who they are. Which is sad because unfortunately, a lot of, and I'm not going to just put it on schools because we have to take responsibility too. Which is sad because even in our homes, because I believe education starts in the home. A lot of us, a lot of parents, a lot of people are not educating themselves on their history and knowing who they are so that they can educate the children that are coming behind. And then helping them actually see, okay, why? Why this strong hate if I'm nothing?
Right.
Why this strong hate if all I've ever been was a slave? It has to be something behind it for you to fight me this hard. And the only way I become empowered is if I find out what's behind it. So ladies, again, thoughts, because I'll sit here and talk and get real passionate.
I think empowerment and also educating.
Yeah.
Education is so key for especially the young children, and you're right, a lot of the modalities that we've been taught in the profession, do they really apply?
Right.
To Americans?
Yeah.
You're having to, as a therapist, you're having to take some of those, tweak them,
Right.
in order for it to work.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always found when I work with my clients, empowering the children is so important.
Yeah.
Telling them that they are important, that your skin color is just fine. It's okay. Because in order for therapy to be successful, you got to empower your clients.
Yeah.
You go in day one empowering, you know?
Yeah. And a lot of times you have to empower the adults as well. Can I just be real?
You do.
Sure. Yeah.
A lot of times. Go ahead, Gina.
I wasn't an adult who, you mentioned about, the parents aren't teaching children. My mom didn't really understand these dynamics and growing up, and she shielded me from them. So I didn't grow up understanding, African-American history. I didn't understand it at all until I was an adult. And I'm talking about 18, 19 is when I really began, because the school track that I was in didn't teach that. And I was completely overwhelmed with the information. There was a period of time I think I was just numb because I didn't know what to do with it. And when I spoke to my mom, I said, well, what, she wasn't born here. She was from the Caribbean islands. I said, well, why did you shield me from this information? And she said, I believed, and she feared that the information would result in me becoming a militant, becoming a very angry Black activist. And she didn't want that. And she thought that that would not serve me well. So there's so many different ways that we've taken in information and taken in this experience that we've had, and we react differently to it. Completely react differently to it. But I really believe sincerely that it's one step at a time, one day at a time, and it's really about educating children about not believing the illusion or not being deluded by what you're seeing, that it's a lie. And what I mean by that is, think about COVID that we started this conversation with. The one thing that COVID did was that it completely dispelled the illusion of control and certainty. We have none. We never did. What we did is we influenced our lives, we influenced outcomes, and for the most part, it may have gone our way. But we never had control. So to say we lost it, but we never had it. We just were fortunate that things went in a direction, for the most part, that we wanted it to. When we went inside, we turned on the light, it was on. Because we know we paid the bill. Unless we didn't pay the bill, then we expect it to some degree. With our youth, with people of color, is understanding what we've been told is a lie. It's a lie. We've been conditioned to believe that this is our circumstance, that we deserve it, this is as good as it gets, but it's a lie. It was a business plan gone awry. There were people of color here before they brought over slave ships, but it was one of the best, perfect business plan that continues today. And even though folks say, oh, slavery is done, it's over with, it's not. It is being perpetuated in healthcare. We're talking about it right now. It still continues. It's just that it is not visible to the eye. It is more insidious in the way that it occurs. This whole sweep of, attacking Black men and shooting them on sight rather than negotiating with them and talking with them is all part of it. Our white counterparts are conditioned to see us a particular way. And we're conditioned to see ourselves and others a particular way.
If you can control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. When you determine what a man shall think, you do not have to concern yourself of what he will do. If you make a man feel inferior, you do not have to compel him to accept an inferior status, for he will seek it for himself. If you make a man think he is justly an outcast, you do not have to order him to the back door. He will go without being told, and if there is no back door, his very nature will demand one. Carter G. Woodson, The Miseducation of the Negro.
So the change has to come from deep within out. It's really about understanding, do you see, don't believe the lies, do you see that this is misinformation? This is not correct. You are, you are great. You do have abilities, but we're talking about power. We're talking about who's in control and who has the power to continue to perpetuate these perceptions that, of course, our mind, easily to be conditioned, sometimes buy into. And we do need to create things that challenge, that go against it. History is one of them. History helped me to understand and completely change whatever people were saying about me that didn't look like me.
Yeah.
Or even we're both Black, but you were lighter in complexion than me. Mm-hmm. It helped me to understand how we got there.
Colorism, prejudice and discrimination against darker skinned individuals within the same racial group. Colorism is both an interracial and intraracial issue that causes people to unconsciously discriminate against darker skinned individuals. Research show that darker skinned African American adolescent females were twice as likely to receive out-of-school suspension than their white counterparts and lighter skinned African American adolescent females. While Blacks are imprisoned at a 4% higher rate than their whiter counterparts overall, research shows that medium-skinned whites and darker-skinned Blacks receive a 4.8% higher prison sentence than whites and lighter-skinned African Americans. Colorism is a historical underpinning that separated enslaved African Americans based on their skin tone by providing favorable treatment to lighter-skinned slaves who did less demanding domesticated work, while darker-skinned slaves did more extremely daunting work outside in the field. A horrible conditioning that continues to control the minds of people, the judicial system, media, and the workforce.
That's what the education did. It helped me to understand how we arrived here. And I was better equipped emotionally to begin defending the issues, but in a strategic, more sophisticated, and way that would really challenge the people who are trying to perpetuate this. And this is what I bring to my therapeutic process. It's really about understanding who you are, how you got there, and then working the opposite direction to take charge and to take change, and to make change rather.
Yeah, I totally agree. And let me just say this real quick, because there are going to be individuals that's going to watch this and perceive it in the wrong way, because perception is everything. This is not about, in no way, being racial and saying that all white people are evil. All European Americans are evil, because I know some really good ones. But when we look at the baseline, the foundation of Western society, we know that there is a race issue. And there's a race issue, and Gina, you said it, based on conditioning. I have Caucasian friends who have told me that they grew up with their parents telling them that they were not supposed to hang out with Black folk. And so as adults, they have said to me, the conversations that you and I have, I totally hear differently when I'm around my white, people. There's a totally different conversation. And a lot of times they're afraid to speak up and saying, no, that's not true, because I have friends in the African American community, because that means they're going to be judged by their people.
Yes. It's a consequence.
It's sad, yeah. And it's conditioning. And so it's the way that, you teach. Generations have taught each other over and over and over again. And I'm not saying that I haven't been taught certain things about white people, and I'm thankfully that I have overcome that, because I too, as an African American woman, was taught that white people didn't mean me any good. And so as a young person, I tried to, limit my time around them and didn't care to be friends. But now as an adult, and I know better, I realize that it's not all.
Right.
But there are groups out there, and it's a group who are just want to stay in that state of mind of saying, no, this is what my ancestors taught me, I believe that this is my country. I believe that I am the superior being. And so I have to push my agenda as a white being. Because reality is that we're all human. We all
Correct.
think the same. Hello. We all have these neurons. We all take in information. But it's based on how we have been conditioned to believe is the factor. And unless we start reconditioning ourselves and educating ourselves, and trust me, this is not just for the African American community, this is for all.
Right.
Unless we start reconditioning ourselves and re-educating ourselves and learning the truth and realizing that a lot of that we were told was so not true.
Not true.
And that is what's keeping this Western society in the mess that it is in. And at some point, we have to begin to walk and make a change, do something different. All we're going to see is a continual downfall. And for me, as y'all can see, I'm just kind of, as a mental health professional, it bothers me because I realize how it has affected individuals' mental state. And based on that, these people are responding. This is why suicide rates are so high, especially in the African American community.
Right.
When you have a little Black child saying that they fear being Black, or their hair is too coarse and they don't look this way, and so they're not, little girls, they're not pretty because they don't have straight hair, and all of this, and they're not liking themselves. We have a problem.
Right.
And so we need to start educating, because that's the only way we're going to get these suicide rates down. That's the only way we're going to help children understand and empower them to say, no, baby, this is not what they told you was a lie. What they said is not who you are.
Right. Right.
And so this is what this show about. Because Gina, you and I have had this conversation. It's the whole baseline of the title of the show, intake.
Right.
Because everything that we do in this world, we take in cognitively. And based on how we perceive that information, we respond. There's a behavior response.
Right.
A lot of times our perception is conditioned based on the individuals that in our environment.
Yeah.
And so at some point, we have to do something different. At some point, we have to realize that it's all here. It starts here. We see the behaviors, but how do we change them? By starting here.
And by opening conversation.
Yeah, and having a conversation.
Right.
And not being afraid to have the conversations. Because they're needed.
Right. Even if you're being perceived as being prejudiced or racist. But, I always have a problem with that, because people of color are not racist. They may have, prejudice. We don't have power. No. Racism is a white power construct. You have to be in power to be the racist. So we're not racist. So we may not like what has been done to us. So, and people, and white people may have a problem with us speaking against what's been done to us. And okay, I get that. When I'm not making any sweeping generalizations, I grew up with a white Irish family next door to me, and they were my family. I when I was 4, I used to bust up in their house and eat dinner, at will. And I stayed there, play. And I remember one key moment is my mom called me and I ran home, and I was running through the apartment and I passed the mirror and stopped and said, "Who's that?" And her name, she came behind me, the matriarch of the family, and she said, "That's you. You've never seen all of you?" And I said, "But why am I a different color?" And she said, "That's just your color, Gina." And I said, "But I want to be your color." Not because I felt inferior, because I loved her. She was so warm and gentle to me. I wanted to be whatever it was to be like her. I wanted to be with her. Her 18-year-old daughter took me to the Empire State Building, and she would talk to me. She's like, Gina, look at this. And I remember it was a sea of white faces looking at me. And I couldn't remember, when I was young, I couldn't discern why they were looking at me strangely. But I began to understand what it took for her as a white American woman to take me out to the Empire State Building in '68.
Wow.
So my baseline of people is that people can live harmoniously together. People can. It really is about the conditioning, though. And how willing are you to challenge what's right versus what's wrong? Are we going to stand up to ourselves and say, we need to rethink things and we need to open a conversation? And are we going to hold our white counterparts accountable? And are we going to understand that? Think about it. Every great movement that we've had where we've made we've achieved milestones, there were white people behind us in the trenches. There were white people who lost their lives.
Yes.
So the reality is there are people who are not Black who absolutely agree with us, right? But it's really about us continuing to have the conversation, opening up, and we strengthen each other in numbers, because there are groups of people who don't agree and who don't agree by any means necessary. And our police system is conditioned to see us one way and one way only. How do we change that conversation? Who's doing their vetting in terms of their readiness and appropriateness to engage with the community? That's where I think there's some faulty issue. Who's really training them? Because they see us and they see us one way. We've had a number of different mediums out there that have tried to address this question from different ways, including the movie that I had the opportunity to watch, which was Thug. It was about it, and for the first time, I didn't understand. And Tupac had coined the Thug Life, had coined it, and I didn't understand it then. And I had a critical opinion about it until I understood it through the movie about, what it really is to live a thug life. It is basically, it's the way you see us. It's who we become. And that you have a responsibility in creating us to be the monsters you claim that we are, some of us. But we're not monsters at all. I mean, we may do monstrous things, but at the core of who we are, we're good people just like you.
But how
People
many
who want to live
people does monstrous things, no matter what race they are.
No matter what race,
right?
And they're and just like COVID, the statistics are the same. There are far more people that are non-Black that do monstrous things. Far more gangs. I mean, we took our lessons from what we saw, gang life, everything, and we were looking for homes. We were looking for structure. We were looking for protection. But when you put us together, there's also survival of the fittest that is working alongside with race.
Yeah.
So yes, we will fight amongst each other because it is our inner nature to want to have control and power. That is why I think across the board we continue to suffer, because we have the potential to be powerful. Very powerful people. We've contributed incredibly to this society, to what America is, to the greatness of America. The minds of people of color have contributed immensely, not just from slavery and what we brought from Africa that made it a rich country, but just our mind, what we've contributed to healthcare, what we've contributed to, whatever that has moved, society, that has made society what it is. We've contributed to that. It wasn't just that we were hanging out benefiting. We contributed immensely as well.
Yeah. So I think once we continue this conversation and really get down to why these health disparities are so prominent in our community, and we've addressed a lot of it based on just how we have been psychologically, can I just be honest with you? Psychologically treated, and how Western society has attacked us in our psychological state. They have, because Western society has conditioned us in our own way. Our culture has, in a way, conditioned us, but basically, Western society has also conditioned us. And it has conditioned us to make us feel uncomfortable in ourselves. And in that feeling uncomfortable in our body, in our skin, it has caused a lot of stress, and it continues to cause a lot of stress, which does contribute to our health issues. And so for me, it's very important that we continue this conversation and that we start to look in more in other avenues, because when we come back to this series, we're going to start talking about history and why there is such a mistrust in the medical field, in the mental health field. And we're going to talk about that because all we know as Western society is the Tuskegee experiment. There's so much more.
Right.
Yeah. And so when we start talking about it, it's not even to mention, because we haven't even gotten on epigenetics, because a lot of these stressors and trauma that we experience over and over and over again, it does changes our DNA, our genes. And so once we continue the conversation, we're going to get into all of this and hopefully at the end be able to come to some conclusion to say, okay, where do we go from here? And that's the basis of doing this particular series here, because we need to start a conversation. And hopefully this will start a conversation. And I'm going to be honest with you, because y'all know I'm just so real. And I can't help it. I'm going to be honest with you. Even if it's a negative conversation, at least it's a conversation.
It is true.
Hello.
But it goes back to, the reason why we're here. It's the intake and the dialogue.
Yes.
Yes. And I'd like to add to that food, because keep in mind, our diet is really representative of the way we have been conditioned to eat. We always got the leftovers.
Yes.
The parts of animals that weren't the best. And we learned how to make it taste really good.
Mm-hmm.
So we carry that tradition with us. And, that has affected us, because now when we need to change direction and eat differently, a lot of us are unwilling because, our palates are conditioned to something different. And it takes time to change. It takes time to form a new habit.
Mm-hmm.
So we just need to be mindful about that. When we're taking in information, it doesn't change immediately. It takes time, to continue to have the conversation over and over again, for people to get it, for people to learn the skills. You have to keep applying the intervention so that people can master it and people can make that paradigm shift over to a place where they are healthier, happier, and can contribute in a different way. And even to helping people who look different from us to understanding us better. They can participate in helping doing so without malice, without anger, but really with this idea that I want to help you and I want to educate you about who I am. I want to help you shift and change in the way that you see me.
Exactly.
I agree. Again, I'm going to go back to the intake and the dialogue, how that's very important, and that starts with us, But then I'm hoping that we can understand our history and how we're here today, and taking this lesson of this virus, because so much can come out of this. Unfortunately, with that we have a high rate of death, but from this here, it's a teaching moment. And so how we're going to intake this and how we're going to have dialogue and how we're going to educate moving forward is going to be so key.
I totally agree.
Agree.
Yeah, totally agree. Ladies, we can go on forever, but we need to end this part right here. And I'm excited again about this series. I'm excited about where we're going to be going with the different topics. And hopefully somebody will grasp. Hopefully enough people will grasp what it is that we're saying. And one thing I want to say, though, before I leave, is there is a difference between anger and passion. You have to keep that in mind. I'm a passionate person. And a lot of times people misconceive that as angry. No, I'm passionate about what I do and what it is that I'm saying because I understand truth. And so we have to see that. So ladies, thank you again for being here. Any last comments before we get out of here?
Thank you. And I'm honored to be in the company of two incredible women. And I look forward to continue learning myself and continuing the conversation.
Thank you. I'm glad I'm here. Looking forward to absolutely learning and sharing, for sure.
Love it. All right. So that's it for today. So until we meet again, remember to continue to talk about mental health and how to make yours a priority.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Join us next week as we continue with Beneath It All in the African American community and we embark on some of the history in America. If you're a professional who would like to be on the show or an individual who has struggled with mental health and would like to be a guest, email us at info@intake.tv.
Follow us on all of our social media platforms.
Intake Talk Show, making mental health a priority by changing the way the world views it. To learn more about Intake or one of our guests, visit our website at intake.tv.